Welcome to my theater teacher resource video. This preview offers the same high quality content as my paid lessons. The only difference is that the full versions include both digital and physical interactive notebooks, and the intro and outro of these videos have been removed for a more streamlined student experience. Both are linked below. Now, on to the lesson. Theatrical sound, setting up the sound system, the ups and downs of theatrical audio. If you are taking notes, make sure you write down the underlined text in front of these notepaper graphics. Don't write this note, it is just an example. So we have the digital interactive notebook over here. You would just click on these spots where it says type the notes from the video in the boxes, and you'd be able to type the notes in front of the notepaper graphics right here. And if you have the physical interactive notebook, you will just lift up these flaps to be able to take your notes on the paper underneath them. Notice that this slide doesn't have any notepaper graphics with underlined text, so you don't have any notes to take on this slide. Why do we have a sound system? The purpose of the sound system is so the audience can hear what we want them to hear. We use it to amplify the actors' voices, balance the music with the voices, play sound effects, and set the mood with ambient sound. So ambient sound is the background sound. It can be like thunder, rain, anything kind of in the background like that. You must have an input, your board, your soundboard, and your output. This is what we're going to be looking at for the next several slides, are the input, board, and output. First is the input. So go ahead and write this note, the underlined text in front of this, on the spot that you're writing your input stuff. So the description. Input devices put the original sound into the system. So it puts all of the sound that we have that we want to capture and for the audience to be able to hear into our sound system. And we're going to continue going over more notes for this on the next slides. And of course, feel free to pause at any time so that you can finish writing down the notes, because we do go kind of fast through this. Number one input, microphones. For voices, instruments, and anything else we need to pick up. For example, the audience's reaction in a sitcom show. So in sitcoms, we oftentimes have an audio recording of the audience laughing during the comedic moments, and so we would also mic the audience for those type of shows. Microphone types. Actors' mics are lavaliers, wireless body mics, or handheld microphones for live performances. So this is a depiction of the lavaliers, and this is a handheld microphone. These are easily portable, and so it is really great for us to be able to use for the actors that are moving around the stage. More microphone types. Floor and overhead mics used to pick up group sounds like ensembles. So if there's a lot of people that you want to pick up their sound, you don't have other types of microphones to give one to each person, which we generally don't/wouldn't, because it would pick up too much ambient noise and would give us a lot of feedback, we use floor and overhead mics. Then we also have instrument mics for on stage and the pit or orchestra right over here. And they're mics that we would put on stands and put aimed at the instruments to amplify instruments from the orchestra to the audience, especially instruments that are a little bit quieter or we don't have as many people in the pit as we would need for balancing the audio live. So we also have direct input, DI, boxes for electronic instruments. Keyboards and guitars, other things that plug in. If it plugs in right here, we use a DI box, a direct input box. And then computer inputs we can use for sound effects, online instruments, and music cues. So we oftentimes have a computer at the soundboard with us that will be putting in those sound effects or ambient music, whatever we're using, if you're doing a musical, the music that goes behind the actors, and you'll be able to play that from the computer or other devices, iPads, things like that, that are computer-based. Soundboards. For this, we don't have too many slides on soundboards, but they do have quite a bit of notes for each of the slides. So just write these down, but we're going to get into details of how to run a soundboard later on in this presentation. So we use soundboards to process input signals, all those signals we just talked about, we're processing those, and edit the sound in real time. So this is done live while the actors are acting, while the music is playing. We are inputting all those signals and trying to edit and balance out the signals live. Soundboards can change volume, cut out low sounds, and changing the sound's tone are all done as the sound is playing. So it is live editing in the moment. So if you have some actors that are really loud and others that are soft, you can even all of that out while they are speaking. And as I mentioned, we will go over the specifics of the soundboards later in this slideshow. We also have digital boards. They can be run off iPads, tablets, and computers. So we have a computer that can be the input, but we also can run a program on the board that is a digital soundboard that can also be off of a computer, iPad, or tablet. All right, now we are on output. Output devices bring the sound out of the system. So I've got a picture over here of some speakers to give you a little bit of an idea of where we're going with this. So the electric energy is converted back into physical sound wave pressure, outputting to the room through speakers. So over here we have a bunch of different speaker outputs. This looks like a microphone pack, but it's actually a depiction of a headset pack that we use for people that are hard of hearing, so that we can plug that in and it gets an audio signal instead of giving the audio into the system. It gets an audio signal and the person can turn up their headsets and to be able to hear things instead of turning up the audio for everybody. So headsets, speakers. Over here, this is a depiction of a monitor that usually goes on stage so they can hear the music for their musicals or sound effects, things like that. It also helps with musicians so they can hear the instruments that they need to or whatever they want to hear through that speaker, and it can be very specific for them. So speakers are used to project sound to groups of people, including large audiences. So here are some audience speakers, and then the monitor that we looked at on the other page is also a speaker for the stage. Headphones are for one person. Of course, you can use it for two if you do a splitter and have two headphones, or if you share, that's totally fine, but they're generally made for one person. Especially used for the sound tech so they can hear the sound without the audience hearing it. I do recommend over-the-ear headphones for the techie because then it can cancel out some of the noise from the audience and the speakers and things like that. And here's an add-on, a little bonus. So we can use a computer in the output also, mostly used for recording live shows when acting as a receiver. So when it's acting as that receiver, it can record the show so we can edit things later on, or if you're going to be recording it, things like that. We often run the sound through the soundboard to ensure a clean, well-mixed recording so that you can mix everything live first and get that balance of microphones and music and everything, that audio into the computer for the recording. So physical setup review, we have our input right over here, different types of input, our board, so the soundboard, and then here is a picture for the output. So it always has to go through all of these different channels to be able to work for a live theater show. Let's focus on the board. And then if you're doing the interactive notebook, go ahead and turn to these pages where we've put the soundboard in the middle of the book so that you can take notes on the outside edges where we're talking about each of these different things on the board. If you are using the digital interactive notebook, go ahead and go to the tab over here of Soundboard, and then you'll be able to click on these different boxes and type in the notes on each of these things. These arrows indicate what we're going to be talking about for this. All right, on the top or the back of the board, there is a spot to plug in the external audio. Usually it will have a spot for an XLR plug or a TRS 1/4 jack. So this is technically an XLR3 because there are 3 pins right here, but we just refer to XLR because the 3 pin is so common in sound. And then the TRS, this is like your normal headphone jack, except it's 1/4 inch instead of 1/8 inch. Gain is not volume. The gain knob amplifies the tiny raw signal using the board's built-in preamp. We'll explain the highs and lows of gain on the next slide, what it means when it goes higher and lower, but just know that the gain is amplifying the sound that comes into the board from the input. So low gain cuts out ambient room noise. Only the loudest, closest sounds pass through. Higher gain will capture everything, including sound from speakers, and can cause feedback. So higher gain allows more sound to come in. Lower gain does not allow as much sound to come into the channel. Quick note on gain. The most common mistake beginners make is thinking of gain as a second volume control. It is not. Gain is like the valve at a water source. It controls how much water pressure is allowed into the hose in the first place. Balance is key. EQ stands for equalization. EQ adjustments alter the sound's tone for harmonious blending in different sources. So thinking of tone, it's the highs, mids, and lows. Think of it kind of like a choir. You don't want to only hear your sopranos. You want to be able to hear everybody equally. EQ is kind of like that. So high is the treble. If you don't do music, the treble is the high pitch notes. Adds clarity to higher pitches like flutes and children's voices. If you turn it down, you will take out some of the sopranos. If you have a ton of sopranos in a choir and it's overpowering, you can adjust that to turn them down. But if there's not enough, you can turn it up so you can hear them more clearly. Mid-range is where human voice lives. So like us talking, you turn the mids up, it can help the actors cut through heavy music tracks so that you can hear them more clearly that way. Lows or basses adds weight and boom, can beef up a thunder effect or be turned down to fix like a muddy room rumble. So this is kind of where the basses are. And if you want to add more weight to that bass's voice, like if you're doing a God-like voice and they have a deep voice and you want to add some more weight, this is a good place to be adding that. After the sound passes the gain, the gatekeeper, it flows down to the EQ knobs. This is where we shape the tone. If the actor's voice sounds too boomy or muffled, we turn down the low bass knob. If the voice sounds too harsh and squeaky, we might trim, which also means turn down, the high treble knob. We sculpt the frequencies so everything sounds clean and warm. Now there is a reason it's at the top of the channel, because once it comes into that gain and you're receiving that signal, that is when you want to start shaping it. So if you think of it that way, you'll be able to remember where things are on the board a little easier. Aux knobs, also known as auxiliary. Aux sends the audio signal to a second different location. It also acts as an additional volume control. Previously in this presentation, we talked about the monitor and how we want to maybe send different sounds to the monitor, the onstage speaker, than we do to the main speakers. For example, you might not want to send very much of the actors' microphones through the monitor or on stage speakers, because then you will get more feedback because their microphone might start picking up itself, causing that high-pitched squealing that we all know and hate. So you can choose which channels you send to the auxiliary speakers, so a different set of speakers. And you might not choose all of the channels of audio to get sent to every single location. And then acting as an additional volume control means that this is where the volume control is for that additional speaker. Here is a list of places that you might want to send that additional audio. This allows you to send the audio directly to stage speakers, which is what we talked about, backstage, the green room where the actors are getting ready or waiting for their turns, and special effects processor. So I could send one of these auxiliaries directly to a computer and do special effects on that voice. It can all get a little complicated, which also kind of makes it fun to do sound because you have a lot of control. You are in charge of the audio experience for the audience for that entire play. Auxiliary. This is to help you remember what it does. Think of it as a secret side door. The main sound travels straight down the channel to the audience. But if we twist the auxiliary knob, we branch off a duplicate of that sound and shoot it out to a secondary port on the back or top of the board. Generally, wherever we had the input is the same place that this auxiliary will go. Some boards only have a couple auxiliary knobs, and then as you get higher up and continue with your sound journey, there are some that have a lot of auxiliary knobs that you can do a lot more with. Now we have pan. Pan allows you to control where the sound is coming from. It allows you to make it sound like a train is coming from stage right and exiting stage left. And that is this little knob right here, and it's left to right, and it just controls where the sound is coming from. One thing to check, if the sound is working out of some of the speakers and is not working out of the other speakers, one of the first things that you want to check instead of checking the speaker first is to check the pan and just see if it has gotten bumped or turned so that it is actually not sending the signal to the other side of the speakers. So before you hurry during a show and run to the speakers and try to turn them on and off and figure out what's going on, just take a quick look at this knob and make sure that it is center so that you are sending the signal everywhere. The mute button. Mute allows you to mute the sound coming from that channel. One of the most used buttons on the soundboard. The mute button is your ultimate safety net. If an actor walks off stage into the wings and starts whispering to a friend on how they've messed up on stage, you don't want that broadcasted to a packed house. You hit the mute button the second they cross the curtain line. So we mute all the actors as they're walking on and off the stage, so we don't get any of that additional talking backstage. But also, we don't want them turning off their packs because they will forget to turn them back on again. We tell them, do not touch their packs, and we will mute them on our end. On bigger boards, you might need some assistance for this. You might need 2 sound people to be hitting the different mute buttons because so many of them stop at the same time. There's also a way to group actors together so that you can hit one button and mute a group of actors, but we get into that more in advanced tech, but just know that there are ways to do all of that. Before our basic boards, you might need several people to help you with muting and doing the sound effects and run all of this. The solo button. Pressing solo silences all the channels only inside your technician's headphones, allowing you to isolate one specific sound source. If you hit this solo button, it sends only that audio signal to the headphones. Quick story time. So there was a play that I was working for as the lighting technician, and they were having a lot of problems with the sound. And we couldn't figure out why it was acting so weird. And then as we went over and looked at it, the person had set up the audience speakers to come out of the technician's headphone jack. So when they hit solo, it would silence all the other channels on the board with that solo button for the entire audience and the stage, and they were not getting a very clean signal because it was just not meant for as much output. So if you are having that type of a problem, check your output and make sure that you are not sending the output through the headphone jack. Think of the solo button as your private detective tool. If you hear a strange static hiss coming from somewhere on stage, you can press solo on individual channels one by one until you identify the exact microphone causing the problem. So if you had a hissing sound or ringing through your audience, you would turn down the main speakers a bit until that stopped, and then you could hit solo one by one through each of your live channels and be able to figure out exactly which microphone or audio input was causing that sound. Then you turn down that one channel and turn up the main audio for everybody else so everyone can be heard more clearly, and you can figure out what is going on with that channel and how to fix the problem. Channel fader. At the very bottom of the channel strip is the sliding volume fader. It adjusts how much of the specific channel sound goes out to the main audience's speaker. So this controls only this channel, only that one microphone or input. And that is at the bottom of the channel strip. The sound waves reach the fader at the bottom of the board. This controls the audience's mix. When setting up actors, aim for the mix near the 0 mark or unity, providing the cleanest sound and the best adjustment rooms. So if you are at 0 when you are starting your sound, you can go up or down depending on the needs of that scene. If someone's going to scream in the scene, you usually want to take it down. And if someone's being really quiet or supposed to whisper, you can take it up during that scene. And as you rehearse during Tech Week, you'll hopefully learn all of those different spots where you need to kind of turn it up or down. But we want it usually to be at the 0 mark. And part of how we adjust that is to make sure we're having enough gain come into that channel so that we can have the slider at unity. Output plugs, the top or the back of the board. Output plugs allow the sound to physically exit the board, sending it to the speakers. This is usually at the same area of the board that we plugged things into. We will have the outputs. More notes for output. Usually you will have a spot for XLR plugs and the TRS 1/4 jack, depending on what you need for your equipment. Main output meters are the vertical ladders of glowing LED lights that show you in real time visual indicators of how loud the mix is. So you have your mix coming in from all of the audios. This lets you know how much output you are putting into the speakers. More notes for output meter. We have green, the safety zone, your average show level. The sound is clean and clear. Yellow, the caution zone. The signal is getting stronger. Peak moments like shouting or musical dynamic crescendos, when the music is getting louder and louder and louder, can come up to the yellow. The red is the danger zone. So clipping. The audio is too loud. The signal will distort, sound crunchy, and can permanently damage the speakers. So we don't want to be up in the red zone. Master fader controls the amount of sound that is put out to the audience speakers. Use the lights on the last slide to help adjust the faders. So those lights will indicate when things are getting too loud to help us adjust these faders. A sound operator must consistently monitor the stage, the script, and the sound meters. It is crucial to prevent the meters from getting to the red. Given the heavy workload, particularly when managing a large number of microphones, it is common practice to utilize a sound assistant to help manage the operations. So we talked about the sound assistant a little bit earlier, but it is common practice to use a sound assistant. Sometimes someone will be following in the script. Also, you will have a stage manager that is following in the script to help let you know when cues will be going, like the sound cues, but you're responsible for monitoring when to turn microphones on and off. Phone level knob. The phone level knob is a specific knob that controls the volume inside your headphones only. So right here is the phone's level, and that is just for this one output down here that we'll go over next. Phones output. The phone's output is a dedicated physical headphones jack, usually the bigger 1/4 ATSR jack, located directly on the console for the operator's headphones. There are headphone conversions that go from 1/4 to the 1/8 that's our normal headphones, so you can just get a conversion plug if you have the normal typical headphones. Phones output and phones levels are just for you. If the tech booth gets noisy, you can turn up your phone levels to hear your solo lines better. Don't worry, blasting your headphones won't blast the audience out of their seats. So look at the board you created, and as we go through the next few slides, point to the parts of the board that would answer the question or help fix the problem. So the board right here, you're just going to take your finger and point to where it would either answer the question or fix the problems we talk about. And then we'll go over the answer right after we do the question. So point to the part on your board where the sound comes in. Where does your sound come in? I'm going to count down and then we will just check together. So 3, 2, 1. Your finger should be pointing to the mic input up here. That is where our sound comes into the board. Next, point to the part of your board you would push if an actor walks off stage and starts talking. Even if they don't start talking, you should push this button anyway. Let's go ahead and point to that part of the board. 3, 2, 1. Your finger should be pointing to the mute button right over here. Next, point to the part on your board you would push if you need to listen closely to actor 2's vocal lines to see if it is causing feedback. All right, point to that spot. 3, 2, 1. Your finger should be pointing to the solo button. It is awesome if you point to any of these solo buttons, but generally if it's actor 2's vocal line, we would put them on fader 2 because they're actor number 2. So I would have put my finger right here on this solo button. Point to the part on your board where you can turn up the volume in your personal headset without making it louder for the audience. So where you turn up your volume, 3, 2, 1. Your finger should be pointing to the phone's level right over here. And last but not least, point to the part on your board where you would adjust if you had speaker feedback but don't know where it's coming from yet. So go ahead and point to that part on your board. 3, 2, 1. Your finger should be pointing to the master fader right over here. All right, feel free to refer back to this paper while you're using different soundboards to remember what the knobs, buttons, and faders do. All boards are different, so remember to research the specific board you're using. Oftentimes, the companies of the boards will put out instructions on YouTube, creating a YouTube video for it. So if you are a visual learner, that is where I recommend going to know how to run the specific boards. But this is the general of soundboards. Thanks for listening. Teachers, please like and share so I can continue making content.